So our first speaker tonight is Ryan Lawyer. Special Agent Ryan Lawyer is a native of Missouri and is currently assigned to the DEA St. Louis Division as the Demand Reduction Coordinator. He was previously a member of the Missouri State Water Patrol. He holds a bachelor degree in criminal justice and an associate degree in law enforcement. After graduation from the DEA Academy in 2004, Lawyer was assigned to a general enforcement group, the Financial Investigations Group, and the St. Louis Airport Task Force, where he conducted complex narcotics investigations. Lawyer shares his unique expertise about drug trends and emerging threats with community coalitions, civic leaders, state, local, and national drug prevention organizations, as well as other federal agencies to support collaborative drug prevention and education efforts. So welcome, Special Agent Ryan Lawyer.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight. Kind of what I'm going to talk about is, mainly how we got to where we are with the heroin epidemic. When I started doing my job now as a demand reduction coordinator about a little over a year ago, I thought, well, how am I going to do this? I was always the agent that, out doing what you would think an agent would be doing, tracking down bad guys, doing surveillance all the time, going out in the middle of the night, doing wiretaps, all these kind of things. When I got this assignment, kind of had to look and do a little research, and I'm all about kind of layman's terms. I always say, I'm not the smartest person. I'm like the knuckle dragging, cop for the most part. So once I kind of started doing some research, it kind of made me develop some different thinkings about heroin. Most people don't understand where heroin comes from for the most part. Those slides that was up there just a second ago, that's a poppy. Most people understand that, heroin comes from that plant, but they don't understand that all the prescription pain pills that we see out there today come from the same plant. So that makes them the same thing. And what I'm going to kind of talk mainly about is these the opiate pain pills. Any type of the narcotic pain pills that you see out there today, that's why we have such a problem with heroin. I'll get into that here in a little bit. Right now in America, prescription drug abuse is more rampant than all other drugs combined. And think about that. What I always say, it's kind of interesting because if someone's going to take meth or coke or something like that, they have to make a decision. They have to say, I am going to take that meth or coke. It's not that way with the opioids. You can barely see it down there, but at the bottom it says perception. That's the reason we have a problem today with pain pills. It's perception. Everyone thinks, well, it came from a doctor. It's good for you. They would never take heroin because they know it's bad for them. It's kind of a trap. I'm kind of going to get into that in a minute, how people accidentally get hooked into doing heroin. Go ahead. Okay, this slide here says 80% of the world's supply of opiates is used in America. I'll get to that a little more in a second. What people don't realize, and this is one of the big shocks to me when I started doing demand reduction work, is 80% of heroin users never intended to use heroin. So think about that. 80% of people who are addicted to heroin never wanted to use heroin. They get tricked into it. I always kind of compare, a lot of comparisons to cigarettes. You can't smoke a cigarette if you didn't want to, right? You can't smoke weed if you didn't want to. You have to make that decision. I am going to smoke this cigarette. Well, what happens is someone is in a car wreck. They blow out their knee playing football or volleyball or whatever it may be, and they go to the doctor and they get a 30-day supply of pills. They start taking those pills, and before they know it, they're addicted to them. They can, at that point, they can go back to doctors, say they still have pain, or they can, stop taking them. The problem is once they stop taking them, the withdrawals set in. And the withdrawals from opiates is absolutely excruciating. I always tell everyone, I'm addicted to caffeine. So what happens to me when I don't have caffeine? I get a headache, right? And it's kind of interesting when I think about things a lot different now. If I, have a caffeine headache, I can take an ibuprofen or a Tylenol, and about an hour it'll kick in, that headache will go away. But if I take maybe 1 or 2 drinks of Mountain Dew or coffee, it's gone within a minute. So that's how much my body needs that. It gives me a headache to say, hey, drink some caffeine. When you have these withdrawals from opiates, the withdrawals are absolutely excruciating. I'll be talking to someone who's, an addict, and I'll say, or a former addict, and I'll say, hey, what's the withdrawals like? And the first thing that happens is the blood drains from their face. They get white as a ghost because they're scared. Just thinking about those withdrawals scares them to death. And I say, no, tell me what it's like. It'll help me explain to others. And they always say the same thing. They say it's like that flu we get every year. You know, that 24-hour flu that's ridiculously violent. But it's gone in 24 hours. They say it's like that times 10. I don't even see how that can be times 10. I don't even think it could be times 2 because it feels like it's going to wipe me out every time. Then they say it lasts for 7 to 10 days. So think about that. You got those type of withdrawals, and all you have to do is take one more pill and they're gone immediately. And that's where people start getting addicted and they switch to heroin. Those pills, once they can't get anymore, they're about $80 a piece. Who can afford that? I get mad at my wife for going and buying Starbucks every day. That's $5 a day. I say, man, that's $25 a week you're spending on coffee. So imagine how quickly that adds up when you are abusing those pills. So that's when people go down the street and they get a $10 bag of heroin. So go ahead. And a lot of it is just how we are as Americans. This slide kind of pokes fun at us as Americans. You know, it's all about medication. By the time we're born, by the time we go on the ground, we're taking some type of medication because it's kind of the easy way out, right? What happens to us a lot is when we go to the doctor, when we're kids or we take our kids to the doctors always say the same thing. Take the prescription till it's gone. Because that's an antibiotic, right? We all know to take the whole bottle. What happens is that kid goes to the doctor when they're 18, they get the wisdom teeth out, and the doctor gives them a 2-week supply of Percocet or hydrocodone or whatever it may be, and they take the whole bottle because they've always been told to take it till it's gone. Who in here's broke a leg or had a real bad injury? What'd you do down here? Broke your kneecap in half. All right, we'll take broken kneecap in half. It hurt really bad, right? How bad it hurt the second day? How about the third day? All right, you're a bad example. How about the 5th day? What about the 5th day? Did it still hurt? A little less? Bunch of pain pills. All right, you're a bad example. Basically, normally what people always say is, yeah, it hurt horribly for the first couple days. After the 3rd or 4th day, the pain was tolerable. What we'd say is once the pain starts to subside, stop taking the pills. You don't need 2 more weeks of pills once the pain starts to subside a little bit. So this is a circle of addiction. This is how the trap happens. Once you start taking those pills for whatever injury it might be, you start taking them over time. Once you stop taking them, the withdrawals start. You have to take more to keep from getting withdrawals, and before you know it, you're full-blown addicted. Go ahead. All right, this slide here always baffles me. The United States makes up 5% of the world's population, but we use almost the world's entire supply of these pain pills. I just don't understand that. Other countries have good health care. Granted, ours is the best in the world, but other countries have good health care. So there's a lot of theories behind why we use the world's entire supply, but I'll kind of leave that up to some of you. Go ahead. All right, let's talk about fentanyl. Everyone's heard of fentanyl, right? The heroin epidemic or the opiate epidemic, it's kind of like the perfect storm. Back in the early 2000s, the perception of these pain pills was they're non-addictive. Doctors prescribed them heavily because the doctors were lied to, frankly, told that they were not addictive. So the doctor's like, great, I finally have a product to treat pain. A lot of people got addicted to them. They started using heroin, and then fentanyl came along. I have one slide that I show sometimes. It shows like the amount of deaths between like 2004 to 2014. It says they quadrupled. Well, they quadrupled because more people started using heroin because they were getting addicted to the pain pills. But then in 2015, everything changed. That's when fentanyl came on the scene. Fentanyl is one of the most deadly drugs on the planet. It's an opiate, but it doesn't come from the opiate or the poppy plant. It's synthetic. It's made in a laboratory. And now you can go ahead to the next one. And now Chinese cartels have figured out how to make it in laboratories, and they're making it by the ton. They're then selling that to drug cartels in Mexico, and it's coming across the southwest border by the ton. So think about that, by the ton. These are the lethal doses of heroin. So, it takes a little bit of heroin to kill you. Fentanyl, just a few grains of salt on your skin can kill you. That's how deadly it is. Fentanyl is used by states when they're administering lethal injection. So that's what all these states are using now to perform lethal injections, because it's such a deadly drug and very effective. 72,000 people is how many people died in America last year from drug overdose. Without Narcan, you could probably put another 0 on this, frankly. Luckily, we have Narcan to combat that a little bit. But this is Seahawks Stadium out in Seattle. It holds 72,000 people. So think about everybody in that stadium just dropping dead. How many people flew on a plane before? Yeah, were you scared? Always when I'm talking to kids, I'll be like, hey, were you guys scared to fly on a plane? They're like, no, I'm not scared of anything. I said, well, imagine if one plane crashed in America per day and killed everybody on board. Would you ever get on a plane? Then they kind of freak out. I would never fly again if that happened. Remember a year or two ago when those 2 planes went down in the world? A whole line of aircraft was grounded because everyone was so scared of some type of malfunction with that aircraft. So think about that. That's how many people die per day in America. You can't really see it very well, but it's like 192 people die daily. One of these large planes hold 172 people. So that's a pretty interesting statistic. Go ahead. So a lot of publicity out there about guns kill people. Well, actually, the statistics are that drug overdose is a leading cause of death among young people these days, more than traffic accidents and other things. Go ahead. All right, let's talk about fentanyl again. Like I said, it's a perfect storm. Fentanyl is one of the most deadly drugs we've ever seen, and it's coming into the area like crazy. I worked a case in 2005 in Oregon where this chemist down in Mexico, we arrested him, and he admitted to sending 2 kilos of fentanyl into the U.S. And everybody in DEA actually just freaked out. The people in Washington, D.C. are like, some guy in Mexico made 2 kilos of fentanyl. They were just like, holy cow, how is this possible? Now it's coming in by the ton every day. It's insane how much. You got to look at it from the drug trafficker's perspective. A kilo of fentanyl in China is $3,000. On the streets of America, it's $60,000. It's all about the dollars, right? All comes from China. Just because, here in America, it's really hard to get precursors to make it. In a lot of other countries, even in Mexico, it's hard to get the chemicals needed to make fentanyl. In China, you can get anything. So all of it comes from China, and they're making it in factories. The strange thing about it, we have agents in China, but we don't have arrest powers. We advise. So luckily, China just a few months ago made fentanyl illegal. So now, hopefully, the Chinese government will actually go down the street and shut down the fentanyl factory. The thing that really scares me personally as a DEA agent, we see this different, kind of the trends. This is what scares me. These are fake hydrocodons. They're fentanyl pills, for lack of a better word. You got to think about this, once again, from a drug trafficker's perspective. They have consultants. They understand that overdose is bad for business. So how do they mitigate the drug overdose? Because the last thing they really want to do is kill their customer. So what they do is they get some fentanyl. They start putting it in their own pills. That way they can control the dose. They don't got to rely on the guy on the street corner in his basement with a 7th grade education mixing this up and hoping he gets the mixture right. So I don't know if you can get that slide to work, but this is what's called a pill press. You can go on Amazon, buy one for $2,000, or you can buy a really cheap one for a couple $100. Get on the internet, then order you some fentanyl. You can buy anything off the internet. You'd be amazed. Every FedEx, UPS truck going up and down the road, it's got some kind of drugs on it someone bought over the internet. Trust me, every day, you would be able to find something on one of those trucks, unbeknownst to the drivers or anybody at UPS or FedEx. That's just kind of how it is. Even the U.S. Postal Service is, heavily used to traffic narcotics. So that's what we're seeing a lot of these days is people are buying fentanyl, and they will just start making their own pills. It's really scary because Xanax. Everyone's heard of Xanax, right? Xanax is everywhere. Every high school kid in America has heard of Xanax. Every middle school kid in America has heard of Xanax. To them, it's like, take one of these, it'll just kind of chill you out a little bit. It's heavily abused among those young kids. What we're seeing now is a lot of fentanyl pills that look just like a Xanax. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two. So your high school kid takes one of those, they might just drop dead. An interesting news article that a news station in Phoenix, Arizona put out about a year ago. If you guys have time, Google, Phoenix Fire Department fentanyl overdose. And it's a story about this guy who was a captain for the fire department. He was like a major in the Army. He goes back for drill one weekend. He'd hurt his hand a couple weeks before, and he was awaiting surgery, so the doctor gave him some pain pills. And he gets to drill, and he forgot his pain pills. So he's like, oh, man, I forgot my hydrocodone or whatever. One of the guys says, well, here, I have some. And he looks at it, and it looks identical to what he's been taking. He takes it, and the next day they find him on the floor dead. Well, that was a counterfeit oxycodone or hydrocodone, and it was a fentanyl pill, and it killed him. So, like I said, now we're seeing it like crazy. These are some of the seizures that we've had recently in Missouri, Illinois, and Kansas. This was 60 pounds of fentanyl. It's enough to kill every man, woman, and child in the states of South Dakota, Nebraska, Illinois, Kansas, and Missouri, and half of Illinois. So think about it. 60 pounds we caught out on the interstate can basically wipe out 4 states. This was an interesting seizure down in Cape Girardeau. This is a tackle box filled with different types of pills. It's exactly what this guy was doing. He was ordering different types of drugs from China, putting them in his pill press, and making them, using the U.S. Postal Service to deliver them. So that's that's one of the scary things today. Like I said, these pills, we can make them look any shape, any design, any numbers, any letters on them. So you never know what you're getting. Kids, they don't really pay attention anyway. They say, take the blue one, it'll make you feel funny. Especially if it's something they've seen before. Oh, well, mom takes these. The only way out of this is through education. I always kind of compare it to cigarettes because, we all kind of understand how things were with cigarettes over the last 50 years. Back in the 60s and 70s, everybody smoked, right? Because everyone's perception was they were safe. Then it took decades to educate the public of the dangers of smoking. My daughter's 15, my son is 12. When my son was, let's say, about 6 or 7, I would have to tell him, you can't walk up to people in the Walmart parking lot who you see smoking a cigarette and tell them they're going to die. I know that they probably appreciate you being concerned for them, but you just can't walk up and tell them you're going to die smoking a cigarette. But that's kids' perception these days. So it's going to take all of us to educate the public again about the dangers of these pain pills and how to use them responsibly. So that way, when we're 18, we get our wisdom teeth out, we take 3 days worth of pills and not 2 weeks worth of pills and become addicted to them. Well, thank you all for being here. Go back and tell your friends and family hopefully you learned something about the dangers of these pills, because that's the only way we'll find our way out of this situation. Thank you.